Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Erudition Network. Welcome to our interactive Black History and Knowledge session. I am their host, Eddie Phillips. I am also the founder of the Erudition Network. We do this show every Thursday to teach Black history and cover issues pertaining to Black history. It is an interactive show, so you are encouraged to ask questions and to inquire about some of the things that we're talking about in the chat. If you are trying to chat with us on Facebook, please allow StreamYard the ability to show your chat so we can show it on the screen. If you are watching us on YouTube, you should be able to just participate in our live chat, as well as if you are on Twitch. All right. Tonight, as you can see, I'm a little down in the weather today. I haven't really felt well today. Hey, Sean Anthony, good to see you. So I ask that you all bear with me tonight because I'm still going to do the show tonight and make sure we get something, out here today. It is always a good day for us to talk about Black history. As you know, Black History Month just passed. We get February to focus on Black history. However, here on Erudition, we teach Black history every week. Every Thursday, we're here to talk to you about Black history and to provide information on it. I today had so much going on. I don't know specifically what we will discuss, but I know that we will cover some things tonight because I want something we will cover tonight. This past week, on Tina's show on Monday, there was a lot of discussion about medicine and how medicine is used in the Black community, particularly slave medicine, and the idea of how slaves utilized roots and poultices and tonics to heal when there was no immediate medical care. A lot of the times, the masters, depending on the age and the value of the slave, wouldn't always seek a doctor. As a matter of fact, in one of the narratives I was reading, one of the slaves said that the master let old mammy doctor us, right? And she used herbs and wood and different things to try to heal. But if it was something severe, like a broken arm or something like that, the master would then go in and get a white doctor. Now, this is important because in the idea of those masters, of those slave owners, there was insurance on these slaves. So it was economical for them to have a white doctor treat them when it was something severe. And if it was just a cold or something that they felt that the slave could get past, to allow the other slave doctors to use their natural methods and natural medicine to heal. So it wasn't uncommon. It wasn't something that was uncommon. But as she was talking about that this past Monday, a lot of questions came up about what could be used, what was used. And we could go through lists and lists and lists and lists of things that were used. But I did want to talk about it a little bit tonight and go into the idea of what was considered contemporary medical practices then. Because remember, at this time too, it wasn't uncommon for white doctors to bleed someone out, to bleed them to hopefully fight off the disease. So their medicine wasn't all that either. So if people look down on slaves or enslaved people's methods of medical practice and compare that to, say, whites, what honestly is the difference? What honestly is the difference? Because the truth of the matter is, I'm going to take this off you all. The truth of the matter is that they were, by all means, treating the best they could also, given white methods, given the things that they felt that they had learned from what they call contemporary or civilized doctors. But anyway, you can't base medical care on skin color. I'll say this again. You can't base medical care on skin color, but this country did. This country did. And a lot of times, if you go and you look at the history, you will see that a lot of the better tonics and medicines and things were actually stolen from Native Americans and slaves who were willing to go out and use roots and plants and things that they saw as familiar, and they would learn. The other part about that is that a lot of the indigenous people, we talked about this many weeks ago, had a relationship with the black slave that was not the relationship with the white slave owner. In other words, when we look at the Maroons and we look at the tribes who helped to hide them and protect them and keep them, they shared practices. And the other part that most people don't know is that a lot of the Maroons, those slaves who would leave the plantations, they would actually come back to the plantations. Sometimes to get other family members, sometimes to steal provisions, but they would come back, and they brought back with them understanding, medical understanding. So it was no more of the phlebotomy of bleeding people anymore. They could come up with things that they could administer that the civilized or conventional doctors did not know about and would not know about for years. So the ability to heal came down to many different things. One of the unique things is that we often are told here in today's society that Black people suffer from ailments based on their slave history. Historians have said it. Doctors tell you it. And they all speak about Black people suffering from hypertension, diabetes, kidney illnesses, based on the diets of their ancestors. So they say that it is hereditary. But let me tap onto something here tonight. One of the things that has always bothered me about that diagnosis is that when I go look through the slave narratives, when I go look through what our ancestors went through and who they were and what they did, I'm struck by the fact that many of them who participated in these narratives were, by the time they were interviewed, were 98, 102, 89. They live to ripe old ages. And these are people who lived off that slave diet firsthand. So when we tell ourselves that they didn't know, what they were eating or what they were doing, then I have to ask myself this question: how were they living so long? And we're not. How were they able to survive firsthand eating of these pigs and swine and things that we say are unhealthy, and these non-healthy meals and things like that? Do you have to use a little bit of logic? You have to use a little bit of logic. You know, there was an ex-slave named Jenny Landrum. She's from Texas. She was born in 1851. And one of the things she talked about was that in her narrative was that the slave had to be a herbalist. They had to be a psychologist. They had to understand what they were treating in a way that the white doctors did not. They had to know, at using what they had been taught by their ancestors, what type of things you could use to rub on your foot because you were walking into the field, and that this is what were poking you and hurting you. How could you make that those heels harder and calloused? Because that's what they had to do. They had to know, how to provide a vitamin or pick-me-up that would allow a slave to go work in the field under the searing heat and not sweat out all of the salt in their body. These are things that they had to know. They had to know what teas and drinks that they had. She talks about white sassafras root was a good tea to help people with their health and help them with their eyesight as they got older. Jenny Landrum was not a trained medical doctor. She was a slave woman who had been passed this from her mother. How to prevent what they call the kidney disease. How to drink something or provide something to ward away the idea of having diabetes. Now, we know that diabetes is heavy in the Black community. We know that these things still ail us. They ailed them. Poke roots and bluestones and boils, and how they would go about to use these things, and they would rub it on the children. And yet we don't know these things, and we think of it as hoodoo voodoo, right? That has not been passed down. How lime water. I see people in my time in the military, I saw people put cucumbers and limes and lemons into water to refresh themselves. And in the narratives, she talks about how lime water was something that they drank during the summer because it allowed them to detoxify. We're not taught these things. And I'm not going to tell you that everything that the slaves did was right. You know, I had a conversation with someone a couple of years ago about chicken gizzards, because I love chicken gizzards. I don't eat them as often. And I had found out that slaves ate the chicken gizzards because they found that it was good for indigestion. If you having pains, they said that you could go and eat a chicken gizzard and it will purge you out. Now, if you like chicken gizzards, that's great. But when we ask, how did that become a Southern staple? How did that become something that folks they were eating? That's just an example. These old methods that we take for granted, and that we don't look at anymore. And then some of it we have been told and we have been cajoled to believe that it's a spiritualism to it. And that every poultice, every remedy, every herb, everything that you take has some kind of demonic force against you. But these slaves were Christians and they prayed to God. And they prayed to God for wisdom, Sean Anthony. Most of the herbal medicines as well as the remedies that slaves used were mostly correct. However, they were still just as dangerous to us, but they had no other choice but to use. So you make a very good point there, Sean Anthony, that they did use dangerous weeds, that they did use things that possibly could kill them. But they also learned from the indigenous people here. When you look at slave medicine is not without the combining of indigenous people's medicine also. It was not uncommon for them to look to what was here. What is this root? What can you do with this? The idea of the spiritual really comes from the white slave owner. What happened was that when a slave became too popular as a healer on the plantation, many slave owners would tell their slaves that they cannot participate or go to this slave because they could have been on another plantation, because they're dealing in signs, incantations, and spells. Because they did not want people believing in the omnipresent belief of this slave that could heal them. They wanted to trust in white medicine. You know, it's just crazy how people will be willing to let folks die and allow things to go wrong before they will do what is right, simply based on race. It's insane, but it's true. When you look at smallpox, for a long time in this country, smallpox was wiping out Native Americans. It was wiping out whites, and in some Black African American areas too. But here's the thing. Here's something that we know to be a fact, proven fact. The practice of inoculation to prevent smallpox can be attributed or given to an actual slave. And we know the slave's name because we know the man who took it from him. A slave used the idea of taking the blood and using that blood from the pox as a serum for people to stop the infection and to inoculate people. A reverend named Cotton Mather learned of this procedure. He learned it from a slave. And he took it and put it into medicine, so that people gave him the credit for it. But it was a slave named Onesimus who actually came up with the idea or actually used that idea and showed that it worked. Can't say he himself came up with the idea. It was passed down to him on how to fight disease. The medicine of our people, the knowledge of our people has not necessarily been passed down to us. It has not been passed down to us. As a matter of fact, sometimes it actually costs people their lives. So they didn't pass it down. There's an evidence in the history of a slave called Caesar, who the Carolina, and you can look this up, legislature, they purchased his freedom. They purchased him because he had demonstrated the ability to cure poisonous snake bites. And they didn't know how he was doing it. The know-how. And that is the rub. The advancement of a lot of the medicine that we have provided, that our ancestors provided, was taken, was absconded. And we don't know how much or how little they took, but we know from record, because that's the thing. This is why I get mad when people are on social media putting out lunacy. There is enough history out here. All you got to do is look for it. Validated history, because people left it. They left it for you to find. Slave owners are just like any owner. People who sit here and want to own dogs. If they can do it themselves, they'll do it themselves. If they can find someone who can treat something, they will go there before they go and pull it out for someone else. Go pay money for it. There's a hospital, and I believe, and somebody, you watch this, let me look this up. I believe, give me one moment. I don't want to give you the wrong information. Yes. Okay. I wanted to make sure before I said this, because I'm very honest with you, certain things, I may not have the full 411 on the name, but I do know the person. There's a hospital in Chicago, Rush Hospital. And I wanted to make sure that it was named after Benjamin Rush. And if you don't know, yes, if you don't know who Benjamin Rush is, Benjamin Rush was the man that actually signed the Declaration of Independence. He was also a very, very well-known and popular physician of his time. Here's the other thing that is not necessarily said by Rush, about Rush. He liked taking medical ideas from indigenous people and slaves. When the yellow fever epidemic of 1793 spread, Rush thought that the Africans were immune to yellow fever. Sounds familiar, like with COVID. And he used African American slaves to try to help him figure out how he could best assist whites. Now, here's the thing. Blacks were getting it, but they were also treating it. They were treating it on the plantations. Rush understood they were treating, somehow they were doing something that their white masters and people in society could not do. And so he had to lean on African American plantation mammy doctors, as they called them. And Rush actually went on record and said that the blacks were the ones who were actually coming up with cures and treatments that they couldn't come up with all of the knowledge that they had at the time. He talked about in his narratives and his writing about how old black men and women performed or did things to help bring a cure and provide remedy. He called them the savage African, but he understood that they had a knowledge that he did not. But there's no hospital named after those dark-skinned people who helped cure all of those white people, who helped Benjamin Rush come up with the understanding of how to remedy yellow fever. There's no one in history, other than when you go look at Rush's words, if you do that, who actually, how you doing, Pastor Sergeant? Thank you so much for joining us. And this is, again, an example of how history is hidden. Now, we got all these black people in Chicago that go to Rush Hospital, named after Benjamin Rush. Benjamin Rush is just, he's celebrated for his breakthroughs that even today, well after the 1700s, there are hospitals and buildings named after him. But not those black people who helped him figure out how to remedy and in many ways further prevent yellow fever that was killing many, many, many of the colonists, as well as Native Americans. But blacks, slaves, they are the ones that had to help, to a point that even this learned man, Benjamin Rush, had to give credit to where it was due, because he could not have done it without them. Our history of medical knowledge is something, again, it's hidden from us. It's hidden to such a disgusting degree that when old folks, I remember when I was a kid, when older people would tell you what to drink, what to do, people go, ugh, what is that? What do you mean? Why I got to drink that oil? Why am I drinking this concoction? Why am I drinking this lime water? What do you have me doing this for? But today, they've repackaged it. Today, they've put it in vitamins. Today, you go to the natural grocer. Today, they're on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, telling you how to use these so-called cures that you don't even know where they came from. Because, again, documentation is there, but the desire to go look for it is not. Is not. There's a great book called The African American Slave Medicine. It's a great book. It's one of the books I have in my library. And you could go look that book up, read it. You don't have to take every cure. You don't have to take everything that is said. But what you should do is get an understanding of what we've been denied. Get an understanding. That's what this is about. Some of these things that you think people say, oh, that's an old Indian cure. It's not just an indigenous person's cure. It was brought about with the idea of the collaboration of Black people, and those indigenous people. It's the same history that doesn't tell us that the Underground Railroad wasn't just white people allowing Blacks to stay at their homes. It's the same history that won't tell us that the Underground Railroad had a lot of maroon paths where Native Americans and Blacks participated and helped each other and showed folks how to get through woods and areas of swamp and places where whites would not go, and that the dogs could not track you. I was on the other day and I listened to some guy on TikTok tell people that Black folks are the original Native Americans. And when I asked him for clarification in the chat, he couldn't give it to me. And we don't know that a lot of our history, even though I know a month or two ago, I went into the idea of what the Maroons were. Slaves who escaped off the plantation and went into the swamps and went into these hostile areas that the master didn't think they could live in, and befriended and integrated themselves into Native American tribes. And we know that this is a fact because the Native Americans were being persecuted by the whites and told that they themselves would either be put into slavery or killed if they continued to hide slaves. We know that this became such a big issue because when you look at Negro Fort in Florida, it was a Maroon, Spanish, and Native American fort that the Spanish had left so that these people could have a place to stay. And that our future president at the time, Andrew Jackson, in his racist stance, blew it up with men, women, and children in there. And this was the very thing that made him popular in the colonies and allowed him to become president. The same man who conducted the Trail of Tears. But before that, he was blowing up escaped slaves. And his thought was no one should feel safe with escaped slaves living in a fort in Florida, even though at the time, America had no sovereign rule over Florida. He went in and did that, and the Spanish gave us Florida. That's a history that I've yet to see taught in schools. Negro Fort is not taught. So when you see all of this intermingling of knowledge, marriage, right? Do you understand that this was what it was about? Right? You understand that that's what it was about. Historians call it syncretism. Syncretism is a thing that we really need to get into our minds as the children of the Africans. The Africans came over here well before the European. And the reason why we don't talk about their influence on medicine, their influence into these indigenous societies, is because the Africans practice something called syncretism. Syncretism is an amalgamation. It doesn't take anything away. from the belief, the culture, or whatever. If anything, it adds things to it. It is two cultures coming together and bringing their knowledge, their understanding, their who they are, and becoming stronger from it. An amalgamation. That is what the African bought in the early days of the Americas. When he came over, the African bought that. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. While the African bought that, the colonial European bought imperialism. They bought domination. They bought the idea that we're not here to trade with you. We're not here to barter with you. We're not here to grow with you. We're here to conquer you. I posted a couple of days ago about the Garifuna people of the Caribbean, what we call the Caribbean, and how we know that the Garifuna people were there. They're Black, they're African, that they were in the Caribbean from possibly 700 BCE to 1200. We know it. They got there early. But yet we still put our trust and faith in the idea of Columbus arriving, even though there is physical evidence beyond statues and everything that these Black people, and even in Columbus's own words, that Black people were here before. But why do we not care? Because they did not come to conquer. They did not come to conquer. They didn't come with the idea of we're better than you. We're bringing civilization. We're bringing God to you. They didn't come with that. They came with the understanding that these are human beings also. And many of them never went back. They stayed. That's why in the Caribbean you see darker skinned people. And do not believe, don't tell yourself that this syncretism came because of slavery. The European did not bring that. It was already there. It was already there. And when they tried to rule the Garifuna people, they fought back. They fought back. So while they're teaching us about the Battle of Waterloo, they're teaching us about the 100-Year War, while they're teaching us about the Revolutionary War, while they're teaching us all of this, we don't have a full, quite understanding of the gift. I believe W.B. Du Bois had it so correct. The gift of Black folks, from the African Phoenicians to the Pygmies who went to the east and were stuck there due to volcanic activity and helped to grow what is now known as Asian people. Even looking in Phoenicians who went all the way up to what you call to be Britain. And there are forts and ports that are old, that have been found, that the Phoenicians sailing out of the Med, going north, trading. The Bible talks about the Phoenicians, but Africans who decided that it wasn't about conquering, it was about being able to bring together society. They didn't come in to conquer. The Phoenician king who helped Solomon, because he had a relationship with Solomon's father, David, who helped to build and provide the purple fabrics and things for the temple of God. The African Phoenicians who took Solomon's men, the Bible says this, and took them around the coast, Hanno, who was a Phoenician sailor who went around the coast of Africa long before any Portuguese or Spanish person ever did. Took them to the other side to see the Ethiopians, to see the other side of Africa, taught them the way of sail. Me and Pastor Razor talked about it, allowed to push the name of Solomon to outer parts of the world, all according to God's plan. And who safeguarded those Israelites? Africans. Because they believed in syncretism. We diverted a little bit from medicine. Yes, the gift of Black folks, but I want you to really understand what Africans, our culture, has brought to the world. Medicine, understanding, treating the very people who would oppress you. You know, in the Old West, they didn't have any, I was reading recently, one of the books that a friend sent me. They didn't wash all the time. When you hear these old songs from Africans talking about, let's go down to the river, we all believe, well, they're going down there to go praise. They do that. They did that too. But they had a place where they would go to wash. Africans are not dirty people, as we have been told. That's not real. They washed. They used different herbs and different trees and different things to provide a scent on them. Now, when I found that out, I said to myself, that makes so much sense. Because I never, this is going to sound really abusive, but I want you to go with me here. I never understood how a Black woman could be out there in the field working in the cotton field or the tobacco field or the sugarcane field all that time, and still at night that master would go sneak up to go try to lay with her. But they weren't dirty like that. They cleaned themselves. And when you know that, when you learn that part of the history, then you say to yourself, oh, that's why. That's why. See, they were making soap from animal fat that made their skin harsh, made their women's skin harsh. They were using things like soap weed that could clean the skin, but a lot of times left that smell. Africans, when you go look at the history, even when you go look at the purpose and the people who came over to Italy and to Spain, when they came over, in the history, they talk about how they would always wash their hands. They would always clean themselves. And this was seen to be bad, because in the European and later on in the Western America, the way a lot of these, because they were Europeans who came over, right? What they would do is they did not wash because they felt that washing opened the pores and would allow you to be sick. They thought completely opposite, but they were the civilized ones. You said Master was the dirty one. I saw where they use leaves to, yes. And a lot of times, people wonder why folks chew tobacco. They chew tobacco because it kept their mouths moist. That's why they chewed it. And it gave them a stimulant, right? Remember, when you go look in the Old West, for the reason I'm in Old West right now, but when you go look in the Old West, they didn't even know how to filter their water. Now, in the narratives, we know that blacks knew how to filter water. They brought that knowledge over with them. A lot of them did not know how to filter their water. And so they would get sick. And if you go read about the cowboys and the Mexico-Americans and the indigenous people, showing them, even Lewis and Clark, showing them, this is how you prepare water. You don't just go stick your hand in a pond and go drink it, because animals defecate. Things are in that water. This is not a made-up thing. This is the reality. And we are seen and told that we are savages, that our ancestors were ignorant. No, they weren't. It's the reason why toward the end of slavery, so many of them were being killed, because they saw the wealth and the value, not just in the body, but in the idea that here you got a trained metal worker, blacksmith, skilled, a trained farmer, cattleman, and I got to give him up. His family has kept the fortune of my family for generations now. I got to get that knowledge up. No, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to go raid them. I'm going to go kill them. I'm going to go murder them. Because nobody is going to be able to use that knowledge but me. This is why they came up with an apprenticeships program, which is just another name for slavery. This is why they came up with vagrancy laws, so that they could abscond you and abduct you and put you right back to work, because your ancestors were money. They were medical workers. They were a symbiotic part of the white experience in this country. They were wealth, and wealth in ways that the European never saw. That's that gift. That's the gift that God gave the black people, that they provided many times unwillingly to white America. And they continue to provide to white America today. Yet we lie. Yet we lie. And we tell ourselves, or we let ourselves believe, that we are not an important people, that we don't have a place, that we've provided nothing. The conservative giant and hero, William F. Buckley, once said that history is the polemics of the victor. He bragged on the idea that they can have everything that they have because they were victorious. And that's where we are. That's where we are even to this day. We let that lie fester in our being. We let that lie grow in our children. We tell ourselves that the European bought over everything. We tell ourselves that Columbus found America. We tell ourselves that the Crusades went and made the Middle East better. We lie when history is right there. It's right there for us. But here's the thing. I gave you the word syncretism tonight. The European could have been syncretic. The European had the ability to be syncretic, but they chose not to. They teach our kids about the Renaissance, right? The Renaissance, the revival. The Renaissance was syncretic, but it was syncretic to other whites. What do I mean by that? That means that the Italians understood, right, that the Indians and the Turks and the Greeks and the Arabs, that they had knowledge. And they understood that they had kingdoms. So what they did was they amalgamated themselves with them. That's what the Renaissance was. Taking that art, taking that understanding, taking that knowledge that had been lost and reviving it. Not at the detriment of the other societies, because we assume that they're people. They chose to not be syncretic when it came to the indigenous people of the Americas and with the blacks. They chose to be imperialistic, to dominate, because they felt that they had taken the knowledge from these other cultures and they were stronger. That is why when Columbus first came here, he came to the Americas, he didn't come with weapons. But when he went back in his second voyage, he came with weapons and soldiers to dominate, to take over. And in order to make themselves feel better by God, they told them. I keep a little note here. I was trying to bring it up. I share it with my sons a lot. And this is what the Spanish told the indigenous people when they came. This is an example. I took this from Professor Lowen a couple of years ago, that he translated and took from a lot of different versions of it. But when you listen to this, you will know just how the cruelty that they wanted to do, and how they knew they were wrong. And so they tried to say that they were proselytizing, that they were trying to bring religion, but they knew they were wrong. Here's the note. They would arrive into a village, and I want you to understand these people did not speak English. They didn't speak Spanish. They didn't speak their language. But they would arrive and they would say, I implore you to recognize the church as a lady, and in the name of the Pope, take the king as Lord of this land and obey his mandates. If you do not do it, I tell you that with the help of God, I will enter powerfully among you. I will make war everywhere and in every way that I can. I will subject you to the yoke and the obedience of the church and to his majesty. And I will take your women and children and make them slaves. The deaths and injuries that you will receive from here on will be your own fault, and not that of his majesty, nor of the gentlemen that accompany me. We do this in the name of God. The idea of conquering is what we kind of got into tonight. Because when I look at the medicine, when I look at the knowledge, when I look at the things that were provided by our people, our ancestors, it was all done in good faith. History doesn't show us that Africans came over here and cut ears and lips and toes and fingers off of indigenous people. As a matter of fact, we know for a fact from Columbus's own words that when they arrived, the indigenous people, the Taino people, actually told him that the Africans had come and showed them how to make spears. But here we are, 2023, and they don't want you to learn this. They don't want you to teach this to your kids. It's a sad situation. It's a sad situation. I'm sorry, I think I'm missing some of you guys' comments. It is very crazy. We are absolutely a victorious people. We are a people of worth. And we need to teach our young people that they have worth. Teach them their history so that they understand you're not just somebody. the things that white folks did in the name of God it's incredible, but not unbelievable. Because so much of it is also the sin of omission, the idea that they allowed people to do things and pretended that they didn't know. That cognitive dissonance. That cognitive dissonance. They didn't just take over the Americas. People need to remember that they went to Sardinia, they went to the Canary Islands, they went to Malta, they went to other places, and they came up with a system of conquering, taking, stealing. No syncretism, stealing. And so when we sit here on Erudition and we teach these things, I do it because I want you to understand, and please forgive me, I am a little under the weather today. But I did not want to go and not do the show tonight because I get so many things from so many people in chat. People send me things from all over. And I try to speak to those things in an educated manner, in a clear manner. We got to know our worth. We got to know what we provided. We got to recognize that thing that W.B. Du Bois said, the gift of Black folks. You are a gift. God has put so much into us, and it's not me being ostentatious or being hyperbolic. It's me telling you that there are things that we have provided to the world that have been hidden from us, that we don't even admonish ourselves. That Black woman who birthed both white and Black babies. She is the only biological woman on the planet that can do that. And yet, she is probably one of the most oppressed historically. Our music, our politics, our understanding, what used to be our understanding of politics, equality, we have to teach it, and we got to do better. I know I say that every week. I say it, I'm going to say it until I can't say it no more. We got to do better. That work ethic. There's no harder worker than looking at our ancestors, working from can't see to can't see, working to death. The desire to fight for a country, the patriotism that didn't love them and don't love them, that oppresses them and beats them. Do I think that God is disappointed in us? I think that God has tried to open up our understanding, Mike. I think he has tried to open up our understanding. But I think that I'm going to use a saying that Papa Dick Gregory used. I think we sat in stink for so long that we started to accept the stink. We started to accept it and we started to ignore it. See, back in the 1900s, early 1900s, late 1800s, after the Civil War, Black people understood. They understood. They called the time of Jubilee, we're free to be what God wants us to be. They worked hard to be American citizens, to build communities, build towns, build churches. You go 50 years outside of 1900, and we go back into the cyclical thing where they're starting to forget because they just want to survive. So we go into the civil rights movement to try to remind us. God did that through the church to try to remind us, through our music, through our preachers, through our teachers. You come 50 years after that, and here we are again, facing the same problems. And it is indicative of people who know to teach others. I don't think he's disappointed in us, but I think there is an expectation. There is a failure here too. There is an expectation. And we're not meeting that expectation daily. It's the reason why we do this program. It's the reason why I take it so seriously. The reason why I put my kids on. It is so important. We keep going in a cycle. And we're in another cycle now. And if we don't stand up like they did in the 50s, and people aren't willing to, you got to be willing to die. I hate to say it. But you got to be willing to do what's right with the gift that God gave you. That gift was for a reason. I hope that answered your question, my brother. I thank you all who came with us for the live session. I really do appreciate you. As I said, I wasn't feeling very well today. If my voice was a little scratchy, please, and it's annoying to you, please, I apologize. Had a lot going on for the last couple of days, but I thank you all. Please turn in to, I'll be on Saturday night to do the weekly wrap up. We do a weekly wrap up on Saturday night for those who can't catch us during the week. And I try to go back over some of the things we've gone on over the week. Tina's show on Monday, the boys, they did their show on Wednesday. And we'll be doing it again this Saturday, God willing. But until then, please share and encourage your friends and family and loved ones and even your enemies to subscribe to Erudition. I hope you got something from tonight's interactive, and I thank you for your participation. And until then, you all have a great and wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much, Pastor Sarn. I really appreciate that. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.